What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Jeremy from the Beyond UX Design podcast here. I truly believe that hard skills are essential, but hard skills alone will not make you an effective UX designer. On Beyond UX Design, we interview folks like Dan Mall, Pablo Stanley, Tom Griever, Sera Tajima, and many other industry leaders to dig into the things that they don't teach you in school. So if you want to master your craft beyond pixels and prototypes, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts or check out beyonduxdesign.com. And now, back to the show.
So they're like, I want to start a business. A lot of folks focus on the packaging, even the name, the domain, the website. You don't need any of that. The number one thing you should do is try to solve that problem and validate if it could make money.
Welcome to the Sera Tajima podcast, where we discuss conscious design for humanity and the planet. Today, we're chatting with Christopher Nguyen. Chris went from zero experience to head of design in just 4 years. Now he's founder of UX Playbook. His mission is to make UX education accessible and enjoyable. Please enjoy my conversation with Chris. Chris, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. Really excited to have you here and also to learn more about your business.
I feel honored by you inviting me, so I'm happy to have this conversation.
Yeah, great. Well, let's dive in. So can you tell the audience a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I'm a business major and stumbled into UX from my first tech job. I figured out, hey, I quite like this design thing. And I was working in a marketing department, so we did a lot of visuals and emails and all this stuff. Then I quit that job and was like, I want to do freelance and touch more on design. And then I kind of bumbled around for a year or so until I first got my product design job after that. So self-taught designer, got into tech by accident. Actually, in my first role as a product designer, I didn't even really know what UX was, and I didn't really know how to design an Android app. And that was my sort of first foray into tech, and also the first thing I got to touch on in terms of project at work. So that's how I got there. A lot of self-learning and being in the right place at the right time. And someone took a gamble on me. And that was my first product design job was in 2015. And yeah, it's been a wild ride since.
It's impressive that you were able to get a job doing design right away. Would you say there was a lot of learning on the job?
Absolutely. Like majority of, I think, what I've learned in my career has been on the job. I think I'm also one of those folks that naturally, if I find something interesting or I'm curious, I will just dive into the rabbit hole. So previous to my first design role, I was a digital marketing lead, and this company, this website, needed a revamp, and I just was like, I'll do it. Like, let's go. And I didn't really know what that entailed, but I was just like, oh, following my nose.
Yeah, I've never heard that expression before. For those of the listeners that don't know, Chris and I, we tend to troll each other a lot on LinkedIn, and that's actually how I found you.
I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I'm super professional. I'm super LinkedIn. No, okay. Yeah, I'm terrible.
Questionable. It's great because I love that there's more people just being really authentic on LinkedIn and, being a bit playful. Like there's a lot of these posts like, I'm so proud to announce that I have been promoted, and it doesn't feel very approachable or very authentic in a way. So it's great to have more of these interactions now where LinkedIn is really shifting towards a platform where, we're all just kind of hanging out and talking about design.
Yeah, I want to move LinkedIn in terms of the design community and the design creators into more sort of like a Twitter where it's less serious. It's more fun, and people are sharing things like they're just more transparent. I think like design Twitter is more transparent than design LinkedIn, right? Design LinkedIn is like authority building, but that stuff gets boring if you write about it all the time and if you chat about it all the time. So I think I'm excited for what we are doing, and all the folks that we know are being a little bit more like, hey, peek behind the curtain.
Yeah, for sure. You mean our food truck?
Exactly. The business that we're going to start soon.
Yeah, Chris and I have like a dream out in the future to start a food truck together, which will sell banh mi's and sushi.
Side tangent, my sister was seriously considering buying a food truck to sell ice cream on a beach in Da Nang, which is in the middle of Vietnam. So we might have a secondhand food truck if that business goes under.
Awesome. Or we also sell ice cream.
Yeah, banh mi with ice cream. I mean, that's
sushi on the beach. That sounds great. Oh, I wanted to ask you, what made you start posting on LinkedIn?
Yeah, so UX Playbook is a thing I'm working on now, right? For the folks that don't know, it's my educational attempt, to fix some of the things that I think that maybe UX education needs to be fixed, or at least my take on what UX education is. UX Playbook does education in 3 different ways, or 3 different things we offer. So playbooks, courses, and coaching, right? Playbooks is your step-by-step recipe. So instead of focusing on like the theory, I would like to build guides for you to immediately read it and go cook the damn thing, right? Or go execute the damn thing. Because I think that the field that we're in, or UX in general, is very vocational. You have to do it and you have to learn by experience. You could read a bunch of theory, but if you don't execute, then you're never really going to learn. So the playbooks in itself is designed for you to be like, okay, here's the step-by-step, here's the templates or resources I need to then go do it, right? So in that process, you'll be learning like, oh, this doesn't work for me, or I can tailor it. So that's the playbooks portion. The courses portion is a bit more hand-holding, right? A bit more like, if you don't know how to get a job in this unpredictable market, I can teach you how, and I can walk you step by step through a video course, for example. Then the coaching part is the personalization that education needs, right? Like, what do you need help with? What are your unique challenges? And how together can we solve these problems, or at least brainstorm to solve them together? So those are the 3 components of UX Playbook. And we cover everything from portfolio, how to build a portfolio, how to find a job, how to interview, to actual doing design work and design management. Yeah, that covers sort of everything, right? And back to the story of, it started as a experiment in 2020 where I quit my job, and I was like, okay, I just kind of don't want to do design work, but I have this idea of like things I would do with my design team, like educational initiatives that we would do. And UX Playbook was kind of born out of that, at least the idea was. So I worked on that, and until 2022, it had organically grown. And I was like, wow, this is cool. But I really wasn't thinking about starting my own business or even going into education. And because it organically grew, I was like, why don't we give it a shot?
I'm curious, like, was there a certain like point at which you thought, oh, wow, I should maybe actually pursue this? Like, I don't know, a revenue mark or a milestone? Like, what caused that, reaction?
Yeah, so 1 month we generated like, I don't know, like 1.2K. This was zero marketing effort. Like, I have really not told anybody about this. It's just like this project, right?
Were you on LinkedIn at the time or not yet?
No. So
Okay. Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah. So then I was like, how did this happen? So I was like following down the rabbit hole. And it turns out that there's this girl on TikTok that works at TikTok and a product designer that just shared it on a TikTok. And I was like, holy crap, that drove a lot of sales. And then the next week, someone shared UX Playbook on their YouTube channel. And I was like, this is interesting. So I was like, could this be a thing? Should I put more effort into it? So in May 2020, it pretty much exactly 2 years ago, I was like, okay, fine, I will do this. Right, I will put more effort into it. And so writing on LinkedIn was a amplification channel, a channel to acquire my audience and the customers of my product, because we didn't want to spend any money. And when I say we, it was me and my partner. We didn't want to spend any money on like paid ads. We're like, well, it's just, you're not exchanging value, right? So how do you grow organically? So we actually started on Twitter, and LinkedIn was just let's just recycle the content, like whatever. It's a platform for writing. It's low effort. And when Twitter growth stunted in like 4 months, we were like, wow, LinkedIn growth is so much better. So why don't we just pivot there? And forever since, we've been doing that. And we've done lots of experiments on the way. Like, we did 1 TikTok a day for like 4 months, YouTube, like a short as well, and a reel. But then we did like long form YouTube videos. So we've experimented multiple types of content. It's just that LinkedIn was the one that stuck. And that's kind of the why I decided to do it. It was actually transparently a business decision.
I'm wondering with LinkedIn if it stuck because you saw the most returns from that, like the most students coming from that platform, or was it, or maybe a combination that you also just really enjoyed LinkedIn as a platform?
Yeah, I think it was one of the first metrics for us. Like, of course, revenue is always important, but I think we were really focused on just expanding that funnel. So like followers it was like one of the key metrics that we tracked at the beginning. And yeah, we just had better conversations on LinkedIn, like with engagements and comments. And Twitter seemed very much like, I don't know, more transactional, even though Twitter design is like quite thriving. But I think for UX, it's not, more for like web design or graphic design. Like, I just haven't really found the code to crack it. But like, yeah, it just felt, I don't know, less personal on Twitter, even though I do love Twitter and I go on it all the time.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I wonder if for Twitter, it's like more the OGs who are having more success because they've been on the platform for so long and have their audience versus going on Twitter now when it's like saturated, and also now it's X. Like, the algorithm is doing different things. I heard recently that they're supporting video more on Twitter. So
yeah, we definitely did see a huge shift in terms of before X and like after it. Like, our content did so bad, and we would like replay our playbook on things that worked, and it just didn't work, and we paid for it, and we're like, what's going on? And then the whole platform just died for some reason. I mean, there's still some folks that are doing really, really well, but for us, we just never really got anywhere.
that makes sense. Yeah, I would have to agree. Like, I know there's people doing really well on X right now, but I think they were around like for years. So it's been, I don't know if slow burn is the right word, But for me, I just also really enjoyed LinkedIn as a platform and really enjoyed the people that I interact with there.
Great. And is there a...
I mean, you're, just kidding.
Thanks for that, bro. Thanks. So is there a certain type of creators that you really enjoy interact with, like on LinkedIn?
What you said about Twitter feeling more transactional also stands true for me on certain platforms, namely Instagram for me. One of my goals for this year, and I've done this for the past 2 years now, is just kind of like write out all my goals in like a Fig Jam. And one of my goals for this year was to be on social media less. So yeah, that was high priority. And when you're on all of these platforms, as I have been, like Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn now, YouTube, it just gets really overwhelming. And I also don't enjoy being on social media that much. Like, I don't consume content barely at all. I just create. Instagram to me feels like a lot of people messaging me, asking me for, just transactional. Like, it'll just be an ask for free work, basically. Like, hey, can you review my portfolio? And I'll get so many of those. Or just like a random, like, hey, can you look at this for me? Or hey, can you give me feedback on this? I like the conversations when someone, and I have these, to be fair, on Instagram, like people will DM me or send me voice notes even, where we'll have like a genuine conversation where they actually like treat me like a person, get to know me, and then we have an exchange of ideas, versus just someone immediately reaching out and being like, hey, will you look at my portfolio?
I've actually found that to be also true on LinkedIn. Maybe it's just because I spend the most time on that platform, and
have your DMs open on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I actually have a DM strategy. So I DM like everybody. Well, at least I'm trying to implement a DM strategy. And it's keeping my ear to the ground and figuring out what my potential customers really, really care about. And there's a number of things, right? And it's like, well, why do you want me to look at your portfolio? Why do you want me to do this, right? So for me, it's not only just a clear sales tool, like, hey, what do you need help with? Okay, let's move forward. But also to figure out what are the interesting problems and why they're facing those problems. Because then either it could filter back into the product, or it could be another branch of that. So I spent a lot of time in the DMs and talking to folks. But yes, you are quite right, where there's a subset of the population that's like, do this for me. And you're like, whoa, I don't even know you.
Yeah.
Like, chill. I can't tell you if the DMs are really working in terms of like, I don't have metrics to track the DMs. There's also something that I was building on the side that I've never released, which is it's called UX FAQ. And it's basically to map all the common questions to a thing that I would advise folks to do, because a lot of the problems are the same, right?
Yeah.
If you dive into it. So I haven't launched it yet, and it was just kind of to categorize different things and then brainstorming like what's interesting out of that. But that's also one of the projects that makes DMs kind of fun, but usually they're not like amazingly exciting, right? It's the same things.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And I do really like the idea of using one-on-one conversations as inspiration for what to create or where there might be gaps. So that's definitely something that I consider as well. But on LinkedIn specifically, I do require people to know my email to add me, because there's literally no platform that I have where I actually just keep to people that I really know in person or like, actually have a relationship with. So I like to keep LinkedIn as that like source for me.
Yeah, all the other platforms are just like for growth or for, yeah. So that makes sense. Mine is Instagram. I have my personal account. So I typically don't use it for personal things anymore, like social media.
Yeah.
It's pretty much just acquisition channels for UX Playbook.
Can you share with us what course you started with and how many you have now?
Okay, so I've been doing this thing. I've been bundling my products together as experiments. So actually, the first thing I did was, I think, Proto Persona Guide. So teaching folks how to do Proto Personas, right? And then it expanded to like stakeholder interviews or wireframes or prototyping. So, and then there was 12 different things or 14 different things. And then I bundled that together and made UX Playbook. Then it was like, okay, well, bundling kind of works. Instead of selling one thing, because a lot of the customers that we had would buy like 6 things or 4 things or whatever, right? So I was like, well, let's make it easier and just sell it at a higher price. So that made sense. Then I worked on management, because that was something that was near and dear to my heart. And I wrote this article kind of breaking down what we did as a team, as a design team. And obviously it's not just me, there's a bunch of other talented folks that build these systems, but I really wanted to document it and provide different frameworks and templates so folks can actually be like, okay, if I'm a first-time manager or I'm starting a new role, how do I purposely approach culture experimentation? That was management playbook. And then, so I could talk all day about all the products, but basically we have, let's just say 9 products on the website as of today. Actually, we had 12, but I've just removed 3. And it's either the single version of the thing, let's just say like portfolio playbook, or it's a bundle of like, hey, for junior designers, for senior designers, for somebody that wants everything, or the course. So there's actually a lot of stuff. And I've probably written, like, in terms of the content in the product, over 100,000 words, right? Over the last, let's just say 2 years that we've been in business. So yeah, there's a lot to go through. And I don't want to bore you with explaining every single piece of the products I have, but yeah, there's a lot.
I just pulled up your website because I wanted to have a look at it. I didn't know you had so many products.
Yeah, I think that's also a blessing and a curse, right? Because we experiment and launch things so quickly, or we try to, right, to validate if there's product market fit. But then what ends up happening is you dilute your offer, you dilute your messaging and positioning. So that's something that is clear as I'm looking at the business and be like, what do I do now? Where do I go towards? Is it more the struggles that I hear, which is always about portfolio? Or do I, go towards design management? Yeah, it's a blessing and a curse. Like, you can have a lot of products, but you really need folks to land on UX Playbook and be like, oh, I know exactly what you do. And that's something I still haven't figured out.
Yeah, that is a big challenge. I can really relate to you there, because I started with focusing on people just trying to get into the industry. As you know, like, started with the intro course and the boot camp. And now I'm like in the process of completely redoing the craft and focusing more on what impact I want to have. So that was kind of like the lens for me to process everything through. Like, does it align with what I'm trying to accomplish here? And if not, it needs to go. So I'm slowly, like, it's just me right now. So I'm in the process of like slowly doing things. Hey, you, just wanted to drop into this timeline to let you know that my new Sustainable Growth mini course is now live. I created this to give you a taste of what I cover in the full Sustainable Growth Playbook. Check it out. It's free. And if you prefer to learn live with me, then make sure you subscribe to the Crafts newsletter and I will let you know when I'm doing a new live cohort. Here's some quick words from an AI designer who took my course, and excuse the language. Holy shit, Sera Tajima has such an amazing class in growth. I learned so much. The thing is, people talk about growth hacking. People talk about sustainability, but no one talks about sustainable, responsible growth. Given the AI field I'm in, this is direly needed because everyone wants more compute. Sera's framework is chef's kiss. So if you want to learn more, go to www.the-craft.io/growth, or you can find it in the show notes. I wanted to dive further into this culture of experimentation that you seem to have built. And then also, if you don't mind sharing like a few projects that you've done that really stand out to you in terms of learnings.
Cultural experimentation, I think it first starts with my personality, where I like doing lots of new things. Like, new things excite me. So I like moving from project to project. So that's something we should recognize. And then second is, I'm not a huge believer of doing like super deep research before doing something. I like to have a hypothesis, just enough research, like, hey, I hear a few of these things that are bubbling up, and this is quite interesting, and really go with momentum there. So when I launch something, it's usually based on the momentum, some sort of hypothesis I had at one time, and then speaking to a few folks and being like, okay, here's my take on what a product would look like. And then the experimentation is not so much within the product development. It's actually more after launch to see, okay, well, did that messaging work? And what's the appetite of this product? And what are people saying when they, read the website or even buy the product, right? Or don't buy the product. So then it's kind of like building a muscle to launching products. And that's really what we have been focusing on. Like, what's a successful launch? How do you launch? We try a bunch of things. Like, the job sprint launch was a live event, which was pretty crazy. Yeah, like, there isn't too much to it. Like, I might be oversimplifying it, but that's basically how I think about experimentation. The one thing that a lot of folks who want to start businesses get stuck on is this whole thing, like perfectionism, especially designers. Like, I want this to be perfect. And I'm not that kind of person. I'm like, I just want to do it and see if it works. So that's kind of approach I have to experimentation. And some projects, the one standout product, we were talking about how folks are really obsessed with their portfolios, right? And you're like, well, why are you obsessed with your portfolio? I want a job, right? That's usually one of the times that you think about portfolios the most. You're not thinking about your portfolio like throughout the year. You're just like, when I need a job, I'll do my portfolio, right? And this is a learning that really hurt me because it was such a good learning. So two different products. One product, I spent 6 weeks working with 6 designers, and then spending 6 months after that to construct a course around job search, right? Like, that's the goal. If that's your goal, okay. Launched, it completely flopped. Versus the other product, I did it in 2 weeks, right? Like, just going super hard and writing like 50,000 words, and it just blew up, right? Best revenue month ever, all this stuff, right? So the main learning is like, just execute quicker than you need to, right? Your hypothesis, it's all BS until someone clicks the buy button or someone says, wow, this is amazing, right? So yeah, and it was like, I think the least time I spent on like a product or the problem, it seems to be the most popular thing. So my like hindsight is 2020, I should just focus on what the market cares about and not what I think the market should care about, because yes, they want jobs, but they just see the portfolio as the only path to success. But I'm like, it's not actually. I know, I've been there, but the market is the market, right?
So the course that was really successful was actually the portfolio course?
Yeah. It was just a playbook. It's a portfolio playbook.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I did do that before, but then I was like, I know the interview content that I make performs so well, but I don't want to, I don't want to just talk about interviewing, you know, I want to actually talk about like more execution stuff. And yeah, so my strategy is a little bit trying to teach people what they need to know in order to be successful, and then integrating the pieces of this is what's happening, this is why we should care about it, and like diving deeper into impact beyond just the organization or the user. It's more like also considering humanity or also considering the planetary impacts.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think like you would know better than a designer that's just started their career, right? And that makes sense if you want to make an impact with them. But I think we should not confuse what they resonate with, right? And educating the market typically is a lot harder than it seems, right? So if they're never gonna join your course, you can't make an impact, right? So there's that bridge of like, okay, well, what's palatable for them and where do they see the value? And I'll just add so much more to what you thought and just blow your mind, right? So I'm always cognizant of that, because otherwise, like, if your business doesn't work, like the number one rule is to survive, right? And if you don't survive, you can't make an impact. So there's always this delicate balancing act of like, well, what do you want? And then I'll tell you actually what's good for you. Because yeah, it's a super uphill battle, and that's also what's interesting about like what we're doing, right? How do you do it? And I think also in a like, because the nature of my product is it's not premium and it's not super high ticket, so I am going for volume, and that's just like the flaw in my business model, right? But of course, I would want to move elsewhere, but that's a different experiment. But like, this is, I guess, the hole that I dug for myself.
Yeah. But I think you said that perfectly, because it's about knowing what they want and giving that to them. So in this case, I give them, how do you communicate your business impact as a designer? And in your case, people trying to get into the industry are probably Googling portfolio stuff. But then it's like, but that's not all you need to know, because just because you have a portfolio, the rest of the interview process is like all these different steps that have nothing to do specifically with your portfolio. Like, it might be more of a presentation or behavioral interviews or whiteboarding. So it's like making sure that you're also giving them that value.
Exactly. And like, portfolio is literally just the first impression. Do you get the interview or not? Right? Like, they're not going to base all that decision. It's probably like 10 to 20%. And then it's like, well, does it make sense to focus 100% of my energy on that? No, right?
Any other experiments that you've done, you know, even little ones, like it could be around copy or, I don't know, upsells or something?
Typically, upsells are really hard, and I haven't found a large percentage of my customers buying multiple products. It might be hovering around 15%, but actually downsells are way more effective. So remember I said playbooks, courses, and coaching. From coaching, it's way easier to downsell just because you've already built trust through a more high ticket product. It's almost, I think the conversion rate is actually pretty damn good. It's in the high 50s in terms of like, I'm like, okay, let's do this coaching call or let's do a portfolio critique. And I'm like, actually, there's so many fundamental things that you need to know. You might as well just get the playbook. And that seems to convert a lot better. But to build up from like, let's just say a playbook of guides to, you know, jumping on a call with me or doing something more personalized, that's actually a typically harder ask. And I haven't cracked that nut there, but downsells work really well if I do more sort of services, which I'm also trying to do like not that much of, because I want to build like a sustainable thing. And I think jumping on calls every day is probably not sustainable.
With that said, is coaching one of your more expensive offers?
It's it's one of my most expensive offers. It could be all like, I've experimented a lot with pricing. So another experiment that I did was just mess around with pricing, like super cheap, super expensive. And I think I found a nice medium, but you would have thought that if you made everything super cheap, it'd be a no-brainer. Like literally 9 bonuses, 6 playbooks, just get it for $99. And people are like, they vote with their dollars, right? They're like, nope. And that's super weird to me. I'm like, the hypothesis that I had was like, so UX Portfolio Playbook came out and it was $19, right? And I was like, okay, cool. And then it was our best revenue month. And I was like, okay, well, you've just proved it that, okay, cheap products work for a specific thing. But can you roll that out to all your products? And I tried that for a couple of months. It just didn't really work. And I tried the really high pricing. That also didn't work because fundamentally, you don't care how many products you sell as long as revenue is better than the last month. So that was really interesting that like cheap is not better.
Yeah, I would have to say I agree with that. I think, pricing is such an art form, and it's great that you were able to test around that in order to just know for a fact, what the outcome would be. But at the same time, when something is too cheap, I think people they question the value. Like if it's too cheap, they'd be like, well, why is it so cheap? Or, oh, maybe it's not actually what I'm looking for, or, just the psychology behind it.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's a delicate balance between like, oh, I'm getting a lot of value and it's a no-brainer to like, I don't trust this product anymore. Quick tangent. Because of this problem, I actually, within UX Playbook, like last year, I was kind of exploring and I went to this startup incubator. And one of the ideas that came out, me and my like ex-co-founder or whatever, was this whole pricing testing thing, because I found it so hard to price my product correctly. So we were thinking about like, how do you build a tool that learns as people buy on your website, like pricing page? And yeah, it was really fascinating.
It's also just the more work you put into something, right? Of course, the more you want to charge. But then inevitably the audience that can perhaps afford that item becomes smaller. And so it's, as you said, like to know if you're going for volume or basically who you're trying to attract.
Right. And there's so many smart ways that we can dynamically shift pricing, especially with one-time purchases. That is super interesting. Like it could be demographic, it could be location, it could be a whole bunch of things that you can build cohorts and just kind of benchmark it against each other and just be super smart with your pricing. And I think that's something that would super like give small business owners like you and me like superpowers, because we'll be like, oh my God, we actually have all this data. Like typically now we don't. It's kind of like manually done and just not very sophisticated.
Maybe it's more challenging with small businesses like us, but even with, bigger businesses or startups that are able to hire a bunch of people, you capture all this data, but then it's like, are you actually using that data and learning from the data, or are you just capturing just for the sake of capturing,
Exactly. And I feel like I do all of that, like where I just capture to capture because I'm like, oh, I kind of want to know what's going on. But to map back the data points and to be like, okay, this is clearly the experiment we should run to see, that's still kind of the missing piece, I would say. Sera, I have a question for you. When was the first time you kind of liked this business thing? Like, can you map that out and can you kind of hone in on like the why of like, oh, why is this interesting?
I think that actually goes back to before I started my business even. I'm going to rewind way back. At some point, like in college, I was exploring maybe doing business as a major. So I was exploring econ as a minor at UC Berkeley and just really got this push from my tiger mom to do business as like a degree, So to some extent, I found it interesting, but maybe not for intrinsic reasons. And then once I became a designer and was working for tech companies, I found working as a growth designer in my first role that I was just kind of like mind blown by, oh, it's actually not just about pretty visuals or making even the user flow nice or making the user experience pretty or the UI, but we have to be really calculated here in what we're trying to achieve for business goals. So I guess I found that very stimulating in a way, because it was like, as you said, and what draws you in is the constant culture of experimentation, testing ideas, making hypotheses, and really treating design as like a scientific process, I would say. So that's what really got me interested and excited about being able to really measure the outcomes, and why I find it so crazy that so many designers that come through the craft or, that I coach don't know and aren't taught even in their job how to measure success, especially when you're coming from a boot camp. Like they just have no idea how to even start at the beginning of the project by determining what they're trying to accomplish, and then at the end kind of benchmarking and saying like, well, how did we shift the goalpost?
And would you say you applied that sort of same mentality from when you were a growth designer to what like the business as a whole now? And you're very kind of focused on like, well, what are the experiments? What's the success metrics? What are the signals? And then what do we need to try next?
Yeah, totally. I definitely apply that. The craft started as a side hustle, and then it's something that I think, so about 2 years ago, my dad passed away. And I think like during that time, it just like it was harder to think clearly, if that makes sense. I was just grieving, you know? So I think at that point, I was really just kind of going through the motions and doing what I thought would be successful in a way, which was more kind of working on the boot camp and thinking that that was the right path to follow. And then because this caused like a really, like a bunch of things happened that caused a really big period of reflection in my life, that's when I started shifting more towards like the impact I want to have. And also, like as a business owner, of course, you need to make profit. And that's very challenging when you're a really small business. But I also try now to be a little bit more cautious about, like, not that I was ever manipulative about it, you know, with like dark patterns, for example, but I try to be really cautious about making sure that I'm really putting the customer at the center of everything and giving them actual value. So yeah, I'm happy to say that I feel that way with the new Sustainable Growth Playbook.
How do you balance? Sorry, I'm just asking you all these questions, but like I'm generally like really interested.
Maybe you should host maybe.
How do you balance like survival mode versus like impact you want to make? Because that's the like thin line that every small business is treading, right? Like they're like, I know what's right, but sometimes I have to be in this gray area to keep the lights on.
Well, I would say in my own journey, I was starting out with contracting. So that gave me a huge financial cushion that I could work with once I decided, hey, I think what gives me a lot of joy is actually the education piece here and like teaching other designers. Then I started pursuing that, and you can't even compare the amount of money you make by doing education versus working with clients. Like it's just completely uncomparable. So yeah, it's very hard to kind of keep the lights on, as you said. But thankfully I had that cushion. I would say what I do is try to calculate like how much money I need to make in a year in order to be in like a green area, you could say, and then determine like each month or with each course or whatever the asset is, how much money I need to make and try to hit those goals.
Yeah, runway is important, right? Otherwise, you're just left with that stress of getting in the green, and you will die pretty quickly if you don't have the runway. I think I was also lucky as well, where I was like, oh, let's just do this thing. And I had other things that supported it. And over time, you know, hopefully you can grow the thing that you're working on. So this stuff like just is really how long it takes or how long you're in the game. You know, overnight success within a year is super rare. So it's just like, can you stay long enough for you to prove that it would work, like based on all the pivots and stuff?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I wrote a piece for my Substack talking about the reason why most startups fail. And besides just having a good team, right? Like the founders are very important, but also the investors on the runway. The second piece really that stands out is that startups don't do enough research to understand their customer and their target market. So they just don't create a product that actually sticks and finds product market fit. To your point, what I really recommend for people who are interested in starting their own business is actually to start it as a side hustle so that you don't have that added stress of, oh, I need to make enough money through this to survive. But so that you can first test, do I actually like this? Is this something that resonates with me? Am I finding a target group for this? Am I able to actually make money doing this? You know, am I able to survive? And then kind of doing a slow transition, because as you said, you're not going to be successful overnight, right? Like even if you suddenly, you know, release a product that's super successful, there was probably a ton of work behind that, even if it looks like it was an overnight financial success. So I would say all the work that you put in now is compounding and leading to that eventual financial stability or success. But that, as you said, you can't expect it to happen super quickly. If someone's trying to, you know, tell you they have some sort of solution that's going to make it immediate, then I would be really, really suspicious of that. And just kind of give yourself time. Like we put the pressure on ourselves of how fast we need to move, right? So it's like, accept that as long as you're able to kind of survive, then things don't need to happen overnight or even in 3 months or 1 year. It's really, you know, when it comes to resilience and businesses surviving, it's the people that are able to continue getting up and surviving hits and surprises and whatnot over the long run that are able to stick it out, that become a success just by default because they're able to continue, standing up.
I want to play devil's advocate really quickly, if I may.
Don't of course.
What I see with folks that do want to start, and I definitely found this in myself as well, is they prioritize the wrong thing. So they're like, I want to start a business. Fair enough, you can do it as a side hustle. Like, completely agree with you. However,
Yeah.
you need to create some urgency about getting the right thing out, right? And a lot of folks focus on like the packaging, the positioning, the story, even the name,
Yeah.
the domain, the website. You're like, you don't need any of that to
Yeah.
actually sell the thing that you want to sell. And the easiest thing to sell is your time, like your service, your expertise, right? And a
Yeah.
lot of folks get like bogged down, and there's just this big weight of like, there's so much to do. What do I do first? And the number one thing you should do first is like try to solve that problem and validate if it could make money. Like that's the only thing. Like the website, the domain, that's all noise, and you could fix that pretty easily. And creating that urgency, like I don't advise folks to just be like, hey, quit your job, but give yourself an urgent timeline or create a sense of urgency. Like I want to spend like $1,000 on this thing, and if it doesn't work, I need to figure out how to pivot. Because I do agree with like a resiliency with just business owners, but I think that if folks give themselves too many breaks, then that's just not a good way to sort of move fast and to create the thing that you want. Like, sure, some things, like if it's, you know, a really, really hard problem that you want to solve, like something in medical technology, that's going to take you a while, or deep tech. But most of the times when we think of a business, it's something that's fairly easy. And actually, you can spend way less time to launch it than your perception of like how hard it is, right? Like if you're trying to think of a consulting business, it's like literally you can ask your friend to pay you for the thing that you want to teach them. Like that's it, right? And I see this so much that with friends, with family, with ex-colleagues, that it's like, no, just that there is a simpler step. And if you prioritize the right thing, you can then gain momentum, because it is about gaining momentum over time. Otherwise, you'll just lose interest. And for me, when I first started, like when I was 30 years old, I was like, I really want to start a business. And the first thing I did was register the name. And then nothing happened. Like, I was like, why did I think that was starting a business? Like, now my mindset has completely shifted. Like, if I was to do another thing today, like something new, I would do it completely different. And I'll just be like, okay, potential customers, can I sell it? And what do they think? And then like the time to close is really, really important. And I launched a agency like last year sometime as an experiment, and within 10 days I got my first client, right? I didn't need a website, I just wanted one. But I probably could have reduced that time and be like, can I get a client in, you know, the next 7 days? So prioritization, if you're starting a side hustle, I think is really, really important. And just cut out all the BS, right, that you're thinking. And it's like, can you make the sale, do the thing? And like, what's the smallest chunk to the close? Anyway, rant over.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, so something that I regularly do with the startup companies that I advise is a prioritization matrix, because founders have so many like spinning plates, you could say, that they kind of get lost in the chaos sometimes. So what we do is we sit down in a session and we go through like what's going to have the highest impact for the business, and think about prioritization around that as the base. So I completely agree with that. And this is also something that I did for the Sustainable Growth Playbook, is first kind of test on LinkedIn, even if people were interested in hearing about those things even. And then when I saw that people were really interested in understanding how to speak the language of business as a designer or measure business impact, that gave me signal to move ahead with it. So I think to your point, and this is for small businesses, but also even like venture-backed tech companies, to talk to the customer, I think is the main point. Like, understand if you have the right problem that you're trying to solve, and if there are people that are willing to pay you to solve that problem for them. Without that, you don't need a domain yet, or you don't need, you know what I mean? Like, you need to know, I guess you could call it product market fit, which can take a little while and like might require some testing and iterating, but you do need to know that there are people out there who have a real need for what you're building, because there's so many solutions available on the market that like there's already a ton of competition. People, you know, have their time allocated in the ways that they do, you know, whatever habits they have. So for you to come in and actually move them to make a change, to be interested in your product, or to maybe, choose your product out of a sea of competitors is really important. So yeah, I also agree with that. Perhaps that's also more important for people who are just getting started or for people who are creating a new product.
Yeah, and the solution is definitely going to change, right? So whatever you do, just know that to begin with. The thing that you have in your head almost always won't work and it would change. The problem itself might also veer and go horizontal or go it also will evolve over time, but stick with that and then the solution should come up quite naturally, or at least we have some hypotheses around this. So I think there's a lot of people that get also stuck on one single problem, but that problem is, doesn't really matter, or that's not the real problem. So there's also that iteration space of focus exactly what you said, right? What is that problem space, and really deeply understand it, then start experimenting on the other end. My question for you is, why, do you have a view on why designers can potentially be better business owners, or even what gives a designer a superpower in terms of running a business or starting a business? Do you see any advantages that we inherently have based on our role?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think a lot of designers can make great business owners. Of course, not everyone, and that's fine, right? Some people feel more comfortable in a 9-to-5. Great, do what feels right to you. But if you're interested in starting a business as a designer, I think the things that we just discussed, a designer is really going to be the biggest advocate for the customer at a tech company and has the most deep understanding, I think. Of course, at different points of the customer's journey, right? Life cycle. I mean, maybe early on, sales is getting a really good understanding of what the customer problems are. So it's not to say designers are the only people, but certainly we have a very deep understanding of how to conduct, hopefully, unbiased research and really, bring the customer into the process, understand them, understand psychology. So I think these are things that really come in handy when making a business succeed. Once you have things in place, I don't know if you're trying to get fundraising or just do a bootstrap thing, but once you have kind of the people in place, for a designer to start their business is really to understand the problem and problem solving, and who's better equipped to do that than someone that has a deep understanding of design thinking.
Yeah, exactly. There's a couple of things I would add. I definitely agree, but a couple of things I would add is the one is we can also be the executor, right? A lot of the stuff that you see on the surface or what the customer sees, we can actually do that. So we can not only we take it from this sort of conceptual problem space and solution, but actually then deliver that and be what do you think, right? So that's why from 0 to 1, I would argue it's easier for us than someone that maybe is a PM, right? Or a QA, for example. So of course we can't, a lot of designers can't code, but there are solutions that you can kind of hack together to make it real enough, right? And then the second piece is, because of UX education, how it's a relatively sort of new industry, that lots of designers come from lots of diverse backgrounds. And I think that's why our field is so cool and interesting.
Yeah.
And lots of different ways to solve a certain problem. And I think that's also, for me, one of the interesting things how designers can bring to the table, because maybe you're, from an industrial design background or you're from an academic background. And that is also a new take on a specific problem that could be potentially solved with technology. So I really like that. I think to what you said as well, that makes a lot of sense. And I believe in designers. You guys can do it. Go start your
Yeah, and honestly, so many people I come across do. We had a design a growth hacker event the other Friday, I want to say, and I ask in the beginning of that, raise your hand if you're interested in starting your own business, and there's always so many people that do. Does that surprise you?
No, I mean, I'm just product ideas. How can I help folks, even though I'm not also learn at the same time from other folks that are great at this business thing.
Well, I want to hear from you. What recommendations do you have for people who want to start their own design business, and what have been the biggest mistakes that you've made that you've really learned from?
Advice for folks trying to start it, I think you just need to live and breathe it. So the first thing or the easiest thing to learn is actually try and do the thing. And then also immerse yourself in the knowledge that surrounds it. Like it really depends what kind of learner you are. Like either like you're a kinesthetic learner, actually learn by doing, or you prefer podcasts or reading. So actually soak it in from folks out there. So for me, I love podcasts. So My First Million is a favorite one. I like Lenny's podcast. So however you want to consume it, but you have to consume different content from different people in different journeys and in a wide variety of different businesses. But I would probably start with, if you want to start something digital, then who are the digital gods out there, right? Maybe the guy from Gumroad, like whatever it is, right? So immerse yourself in the knowledge and then actually do the damn thing. So that those are just two super easy steps that I think most folks can do. And then the biggest mistakes that I made, oh God, there's so many. Biggest mistake in career and business, you're doing too much, right? So when I started UX Playbook, I was already working, and this startup got a little bit of seed funding, but then I joined, I started a SaaS business and then this like agency thing, and then I joined like an incubator. It's just having your fingers in too many pies. So do not do that, right? Focus on the few things you can put more attention in. And I think that's one of the major things that I've come to reflect on. And since, let's just say 8 months ago, this has been my full-time thing. And I don't want to start anything else because I just get so distracted. I can't think clearly. I've been a huge fan of contract to hire. It's because we brought on some people in my previous startup, this like NFT startup that we did, and they were like really senior, and we just wasted a bunch of money on folks that really didn't do anything. Like they're like executives, but we're just like, they didn't actually execute and help the team on the specific survival mode problem that we were trying to solve. So contract to hire is a huge thing. So let them like pay people for their time, but also be like, hey, if you can add value in like a month, 2 months, then we can take you on, right? Then the other thing was getting help. Like I really like to do things by myself. Even if I'm no good at it, I want to prove to myself that I am bad at it. So, but with over the time UX Playbook, I've been willing to delegate more and to kind of be like, okay, that decision is with that person, and ask for help, right? So now I have these networking Fridays, and really those are like no work and just to speak to people and be like, okay, like I'm struggling with this problem, you're in growth or you're in agency business, like how could that map back to this? So asking for help is huge, and I'm typically not that good at it. I prefer offering help than asking, but I'm just starting to get, I think, better at it.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I love that. How do you go about finding people, for whatever you need help with?
Yeah, typically it's like LinkedIn is great. So a lot of these meetings are online, but also referrals. So because I've been doing these networking Fridays since the beginning of the year, it's kind of like, well, who do you know in whatever you're doing? So it's, usually referrals and interesting things. A lot of like these types of folks come from LinkedIn. So that's kind of where I start. If friends of friends or someone who knows someone, but I haven't yet reached out to folks that I really admire in like, but that's going to happen soon. I'm just a bit scared. I'm like, what do I, like, how can I approach these guys? I don't want to be that weird thing, like, give me an hour of your time, please. So first is network. And if that runs dry or it's something really hyper specific, then like I'm looking for like a ConvertKit specialist, right? Then I'll have to either speak to ConvertKit or someone on the internet will know that.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I wonder if you could even just like reach out to someone on the sales team at ConvertKit, for example.
I'm getting sponsored by them. So I'm in their Slack channel. So I could actually ask the community person. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really cool.
Some platforms definitely have communities. I use Kajabi to host my courses, and they definitely have a big community.
Yeah.
So for now, I know you're in Vietnam. Do you have any plans to change that? Like, do you work from home? Do you go to a co-working space? Like, what's your work day like?
Most of the time I spent at home. So Fridays I go out because it is the networking day. So either we do online or we do it in person. I've been doing a lot of in-person stuff recently, so that's always a nice change. But yeah, it's mostly at home, based in Ho Chi Minh City. I want to experiment like the actual digital nomad life, like actually traveling like month by month in a different country. I'm going to slowly go into this. So I probably move somewhere in Vietnam for a month just to bring the cats, see how they enjoy it. And then, we want to do Japan as one of the places. It's relatively close. It's, the yen's pretty good now, but eventually 1 to 2 months at one location to see like what the world is like. And if we enjoy this kind of traveling life, like I have been traveling a lot for work, but it's always been like, 2 weeks here full of workshops and not really enjoying the city. So I want to do that more. But yeah, it's pretty boring at the moment, and I want to change that.
I think it's funny because when you have your own business and it's very much digital, people think, oh, well, you can do whatever you want and you probably have such a cool life traveling everywhere. But I don't know about other people, but in reality, for me, I'm home a lot. And there's also something about routine and knowing where everything is and having your station set up that just makes things kind of seamless where you don't have to think about them. And I find that when I travel, because I do often like do a 24-hour swap between Hawaii and Europe, it really messes me up for a few days. Like I have a hard time getting back into a rhythm, not just because of the jet lag, but because everything is different, so you have to like rebuild your whole routine from scratch.
Yeah, the reason why this came up was because I was doing a lot of reflecting, and I want to make sure that the thing that I build for myself and enjoy doing is not another 9 to 5, or even worse, because it's your own business, right? You're trapped in it like 24/7. So how do I shake things up? How do I say, okay, well, what do I like working on? How do I want to live life? And how do I want to be more purposeful with the things I build? I think traveling is one component, or at least that's one test that we want to do. And then the other is like, well, what is the schedule like? Where do I work? Is it at home? So like, I want to do more of that thing of like, not only do I want to build the business, but I want to build that lifestyle around the business, because as an entrepreneur, your life is your business. So you need to build both purposely. You can't just focus on like the funnel and the conversion. You have to focus on like where you get most of your energy, what new experiences can funnel in. So like, I'm thinking a lot about that because I'm cognizant that we're moving towards Chris is working 24/7 and this is not the life he really wants. And like, let's just pause on that and actually do something about it.
Right. I think it's great that you're being really intentional about that, because if you're not running your business, then your business is running you. And as you said, there, like the time just kind of bleeds into your evening, your weekends. So it's really important to be clear about what your intentions are and what your boundaries are, even for your own company.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, I like that. This has been great having you on the podcast. Before we go, are there any like resources you want to share with us? I'll definitely link your website in the show notes.
Yeah, just everything uxplaybook.org. So you can find me there, and LinkedIn as well. But that's it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on.
Thank you, Sarah. It's been awesome having a chat. I know we didn't speak too much about design, and we spoke more about business, but this is just the world I'm living in. So that's cool.
There are so many designers that want to pursue this path, and they don't really have access to people that can kind of guide them on how to do that. And I know we've spoken about how people get confused about what to prioritize when starting their own business, but I would say something I observe more often than not is people just don't get started because they get in their own way, because they have limiting beliefs about themselves.
If they struggle with that, just reach out to me. I'll just give them the hard, blunt truth, and then they'll be like, okay, let's move on. So I have no problem doing that. If you are that person struggling, I will just yell at you and be like, come on, just do it.
You'll be the my grandma runs faster than you person.
Exactly.
Well, anyways, yeah, it's been great having you on, and please come find us on LinkedIn and support our food truck. Just kidding.
Exactly. Buy my bun maze.
All right, bye.